Tonight we are standing beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar silence, where the stars above Olympus seem to hold a secret that even the gods themselves cannot answer. Far below the golden halls of immortality, the earth rests beneath a gentle veil of mist. Olive trees move softly in the night wind. Sacred fires flicker beside ancient temples. Yet somewhere within this peaceful world, a question has already begun to awaken. How could a child born among the most powerful beings in existence become the god that mortals would one day fear more than almost any other? Ares was not simply the god of battle. He was the feeling that came before the battle began, the heartbeat before the charge, the trembling hands before the first clash of bronze, the storm inside the human soul when anger becomes stronger than reason. But behind the armor, behind the spear, behind the terrifying name whispered across battlefields, there was something more mysterious. A child searching for a place in a world that had already decided what he would become. So before we continue tonight's journey, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy exploring these ancient stories together. And if you are listening as the evening grows quiet, share your location and local time in the comments. It is always fascinating to imagine how these ancient tales travel across the world and through the night. Now, allow yourself to step deeper into the ancient world. You walk along a mountain path beneath the shadow of Olympus. The air is cool against your skin. The scent of wild herbs and olive leaves drifts through the valleys below. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls across the heavens, not as a warning, but as a reminder that the gods are awake. The Greeks imagined Olympus as a place beyond ordinary human reach, a mountain hidden behind clouds, where immortals gathered beneath marble columns and golden roofs. Here, the gods feasted beneath endless skies, watched over mortals, and argued about the fate of kingdoms. But even among these powerful beings, there were mysteries. The birth of Ares was one of them. Ancient traditions did not always agree about the exact nature of his arrival. Some stories placed him as the son of Zeus and Hera, born from the union of the king and queen of Olympus. Other traditions gave different explanations, suggesting that Hera sought a child of her own through divine means after feeling wounded by the actions of Zeus. The uncertainty itself reveals something important. Ares was always surrounded by questions. Even before he carried a weapon, he represented a force that humans struggled to understand. War was never simple. To the ancient Greeks, war could bring honor, courage, and protection. Warriors could defend their homes, their families, and their sacred lands. But war could also bring suffering, destruction, and endless grief. Ares carried both sides. You can imagine the newborn god resting beneath the golden light of Olympus. Around him stood beings who controlled storms, oceans, harvests, wisdom, and the hidden world of the dead. Each god represented a force that shaped existence. Zeus carried the authority of the sky. Poseidon carried the restless power of the sea. Hades ruled the silent kingdom beneath the earth. Athena would later embody wisdom and disciplined warfare. And Ares would carry something far more unpredictable, the raw emotion of conflict. The ancient Greeks often looked at their gods as reflections of themselves, their fears, their hopes, their weaknesses, their desires. Ares was not created because humans admired violence alone. He existed because humanity had always faced the reality of conflict. Every generation knew the sound of armies gathering. Every village knew the fear of invasion. Every warrior knew the moment when courage and fear became impossible to separate. Ares was born from this complicated truth, but a question remained. Would he control the power within him, or would that power control him? As you watch the young god grow within Olympus, you begin to notice something unusual. The other children of the gods often receive admiration for their gifts. Their abilities are celebrated. Their futures are prepared with care. But Ares carries a different destiny. His strength is frightening. His passion is dangerous. His emotions burn brighter than those around him. The same force that could make him a protector could also make him a destroyer. The ancient poets understood this tension. They did not always portray Ares as an evil being. Instead, They often showed him as a god who represented the uncontrollable side of human nature, the part of the soul that reacts before thinking, the part that seeks victory even when victory brings sorrow, the part that wants to prove itself when it feels ignored. Perhaps this was the first wound carried by Ares, not physical, not divine, but emotional, the feeling of being known only for one thing. Imagine growing up surrounded by immortals who already understand your purpose before you can understand yourself. Imagine hearing whispers that your presence brings conflict. Imagine knowing that others fear what you represent. Even a god could feel alone. The halls of Olympus were filled with music, laughter, and endless celebration. Yet somewhere among those shining chambers, a young Ares began to discover that power did not always create belonging. Sometimes, power created distance. Some ancient interpretations suggest that Ares was never meant to represent victory itself. Victory belonged more closely to other divine figures, such as Nike, the goddess of triumph. Ares represented the struggle before victory, the chaos before order returned. He was the storm, not the clear sky afterward. He was the fire that could warm a home or consume an entire forest. And perhaps this was the greatest mystery surrounding him. Was Ares truly the god of war, or was he the god of everything within humanity that made war possible? As the years passed on Olympus, the young god would begin to discover the answer. The sounds of distant battles would call to him. The clash of bronze shields would awaken something deep within his spirit. The admiration of warriors would become a powerful temptation. But before he became the feared warrior of legend, he was only a child beneath the shadow of destiny, a child searching for meaning, a child surrounded by gods who already believed they knew his future. And far beyond the mountain peaks, beneath the endless stars, another sign was beginning to appear, a warning carried by the winds, a prophecy whispered through ancient dreams. For the child of Olympus would one day stand among the greatest powers of the divine world. But the path ahead would reveal whether he would become a guardian of strength or a prisoner of his own nature. You return to the golden halls of Olympus, where the young Ares continues to grow beneath the endless gaze of immortals. The mountain air is thin and cold. Mist moves between the marble columns. Sacred flames burn quietly beside statues carved in honor of gods who seem untouched by time. Yet within these perfect halls, a young god begins to understand a difficult truth. Being born among greatness does not always mean feeling loved. You watch Ares walk beneath towering pillars of white stone, listening to the voices of older gods who speak of power, order, and destiny. Everywhere he looks, he sees examples of divine excellence. Zeus commands the heavens with a voice that shakes mountains. Hera carries the dignity of queenship. Athena will one day be praised for wisdom beyond her years. Apollo will shine with music and prophecy, but Ares feels something different moving within him. A restless energy, a hunger to be noticed, a desire to prove that he belongs. The relationship between Ares and Zeus would become one of the most complicated connections among the gods of Olympus. Zeus, the ruler of the sky, represented authority and control. He valued strength, but he also valued discipline. To Zeus, power without restraint was dangerous, and Ares was almost pure emotion. You can imagine the young god standing before his father beneath the sound of distant thunder. The clouds gather above Olympus. The air smells of rain and cold stone. Ares wants approval. He wants to hear that his strength has a purpose. But Zeus sees something else. He sees a force that cannot easily be guided. Ancient stories often portray Zeus as disappointed by Ares' nature. Unlike Athena, who combined courage with intelligence, Ares represented the uncontrolled fury of battle. He rushed toward conflict rather than studying its consequences. But perhaps beneath Zeus's criticism was something deeper. Perhaps Zeus recognized a reflection of his own struggles. After all, the king of the gods was not free from anger or pride. He too had fought wars to claim his position. He too had used overwhelming power to reshape the world. The difference was that Zeus learned to transform power into authority. Ares struggled to transform emotion into wisdom. This became the first great challenge of his existence. You follow the young god beyond the halls of Olympus and into the wild landscape surrounding the divine mountain. Here, the world feels different. The wind moves through dark forests. Eagles circle above distant cliffs. The earth beneath his feet feels more real than the polished floors of Olympus. This was where Ares felt closest to himself. He listened to the sounds of nature, the crack of branches, the roar of storms, the pounding rhythm of hooves across open fields. These sounds reminded him of something hidden within his own soul: conflict. Ancient Greeks believed that gods were connected to forces that already existed within the world. They did not create human emotions from nothing. Instead, they represented and shaped those emotions. Ares did not invent anger. He gave anger a face. He did not create war. He became the divine image of humanity's endless struggle with war. Some researchers believe that early worship of Ares was especially strong in regions where communities lived near constant conflict. In these places, people did not necessarily worship him because they loved destruction. They called upon him because they understood danger. A god of war could be both feared and respected. A warrior might pray to Ares before battle, not because he wanted suffering, but because he wanted courage when fear arrived. And perhaps this was the contradiction that followed Ares throughout eternity. People feared him, but they also needed him. As Ares grew older, he began searching for ways to define himself. He trained with weapons. He studied the movements of warriors. He learned the power of the spear and shield. The sound of metal striking metal became almost like music to him. The battlefield became the place where he felt understood. Among warriors, he was not judged. Among warriors, his intensity was a gift. Among warriors, nobody asked him to become something different. But every gift carries a shadow. The more Ares embraced battle, the more difficult it became for him to separate honor from destruction. A warrior fights because something matters, but war itself can become something that demands more and more. This question would follow Ares for thousands of years. Was he protecting the courage of warriors? Or was he feeding humanity's darkest instincts? The ancient myths rarely gave simple answers. That uncertainty is part of why Ares remained fascinating. He was not a perfect hero. He was not a simple villain. He was a mirror held toward humanity. You could see yourself in his courage, and you could see yourself in his anger. One evening, as the sun disappears behind the mountains of Olympus, Ares stands alone beneath a sky filled with stars. The marble terraces are quiet. The voices of the gods fade into the distance. He looks toward the world of mortals below. He sees kingdoms rising and falling. He sees warriors preparing for battles they may never return from. He sees humanity searching for glory, protection, revenge, and survival. Something inside him responds, not with peace, not with wisdom, but with recognition. For the first time, Ares understands that his destiny is connected to those fragile beings below, mortals who live only briefly, mortals who fear death, mortals who fight despite knowing they can lose everything. A strange bond begins to form. The god who seems most distant from humanity may become the one most connected to human struggle. But as Ares reaches toward this destiny, another figure begins to emerge, a goddess who carries a different vision of warfare. A goddess who believes battles can be won before swords are ever drawn. A goddess whose wisdom will challenge everything Ares believes about strength. Her name will become forever connected with his, Athena, and beneath the quiet stars above Olympus, the rivalry between two different kinds of war begins to awaken, yet neither god nor mortal could know how deeply their conflict would shape the future. You follow Ares beyond the shining terraces of Olympus, into a world where the air feels heavier and the winds carry distant echoes. The young god no longer moves like a child searching for his place. He walks with confidence now. His shoulders are stronger. His eyes carry the restless fire that will one day become his greatest symbol. Yet something remains unresolved within him. Ares has discovered what he is, but he has not discovered who he wants to become. The mountains surrounding Olympus are quiet at dawn. A thin mist rests over valleys filled with olive trees. Birds move between ancient branches. The first light of the sun touches the marble temples below, turning their surfaces into gold. But far away, beyond peaceful villages and sacred shrines, another sound begins to rise, The sound of armies, the sound of preparation, the sound that awakens something deep inside Aries. You hear the distant rhythm of marching feet. You feel the vibration of drums across the earth. You smell the smoke of campfires where warriors gather beneath the night sky. To others, these sounds might bring fear. To Aries, they feel like a calling. This was the strange attraction that shaped his early existence. He was drawn toward the places where human emotions became most intense, where courage met fear, where loyalty met desperation, where every decision could change the course of a life. The battlefield was not simply a place of violence. For Aries, it was a place where the truth of the human spirit appeared. Ancient Greeks understood that war revealed both the best and worst parts of humanity. A soldier could show incredible bravery while facing impossible danger. A warrior could sacrifice everything for a homeland or a family. But the same battlefield could also reveal cruelty, pride, and uncontrolled anger. Ares carried all of these contradictions. You watch him begin to descend from Olympus more often, traveling among mortals who whisper his name before battle. In small villages surrounded by stone walls, people light sacred fires and leave offerings at simple shrines. Some offer weapons, some offer animals, some offer prayers spoken quietly before dangerous journeys. They ask Ares for strength. They ask him for protection. They ask him to stand beside them when fear becomes overwhelming. But the god they call upon does not always bring peace. He brings intensity. He brings the courage to face conflict. He brings the power that exists in the moment when someone decides not to run. This was why Ares was both respected and feared. A god of war was never a comfortable companion. He walked beside humanity during its darkest hours. As you observe the young god among mortals, you begin to notice another emotion hidden beneath his confidence. Jealousy, not the simple jealousy of wanting possessions. A deeper kind. Ares wanted recognition. He wanted the respect given to the other Olympians. He wanted others to understand that his power had meaning. This desire would become one of the strongest forces shaping his life, because among the gods of Olympus, one figure represented a form of warfare that often received greater admiration. Athena, daughter of Zeus, goddess of wisdom, protector of heroes, master of strategy. Where Ares represented the passion of battle, Athena represented the intelligence behind it. Where Ares rushed forward with emotion, Athena waited and observed. Where Ares saw the battlefield as a place of strength, Athena saw it as a place of decisions. Their differences were not simply personal. They represented two different ways humans experience conflict. The warrior who fights because his heart burns, and the warrior who fights because his mind understands. Ancient traditions often placed these two gods against each other, but their rivalry was more than a competition. It was a question. What truly makes someone powerful? The ability to destroy, or the ability to control destruction? You can imagine Ares watching Athena receive praise from gods and mortals. He hears stories of heroes guided by her wisdom. He sees temples built in her honor. He listens as warriors speak of her intelligence and protection. And somewhere inside him, a quiet wound grows. Why was wisdom celebrated more than strength? Why did people admire the calm strategist while fearing the passionate warrior? Why did everyone see his anger before they saw his courage? These questions followed him through the centuries. Yet even with these doubts, Ares continued to embrace his role. He trained, he fought, he learned the ways of warriors across the ancient world. Some surviving traditions suggest that Ares was especially honored in regions such as Thrace, where communities associated him with fierce warriors and untamed landscapes. To many Greeks, Thrace represented a distant and wild place, fitting for a god who embodied the more dangerous side of battle. The connection between Ares and Thrace added another layer to his identity. He was not only an Olympian, he was also an outsider. A god connected to the edges of civilization, a force that lived between order and chaos. Perhaps this was why Ares often seemed separate from the other gods. Olympus was built upon harmony. Ares carried disruption. The other gods celebrated creation, beauty, wisdom, and order. Ares carried the storm that arrived when those things were threatened. One night, as stars cover the dark sky above the mountains, Ares stands beside a quiet battlefield after the warriors have gone. The fires have become small embers. The wind moves through abandoned shields. The earth remembers what happened there. For a moment, the god of war is completely still. He looks upon the aftermath, not the glory, not the victory, the silence, and perhaps, for the first time, he wonders whether war truly belongs to him. A mysterious dream comes to him that night. Ancient storytellers often use dreams as messages from the divine, and in this dream, Ares sees two paths before him. One path is covered in broken weapons and endless battles. The other path disappears into darkness, impossible to understand. A voice without a face whispers that even a god of war must eventually choose what kind of warrior he wishes to be. When Ares awakens, the question remains unanswered. But destiny has already begun moving, because the young god is approaching the moment when his nature will be tested. And soon, he will learn that the greatest battles are not always fought against enemies. Sometimes they are fought within yourself. You return once more to the heights of Olympus, where the morning mist rises slowly from the valleys below. The marble halls glow beneath the first light of dawn. Golden banners move gently in the mountain breeze. The scent of burning incense drifts through sacred chambers where gods gather to discuss the fate of mortals. And among these immortal voices, Ares begins to understand a painful truth. Strength alone is never enough. You watch him walk through the halls, where every god carries a different kind of power. Apollo carries the brilliance of the sun and the harmony of music. Hermes carries movement, intelligence, and the secrets of travelers. Artemis carries the quiet independence of the wilderness. Demeter carries the patience of the earth and the mystery of harvest. Each divine gift has a purpose. Each power has a balance. But Ares feels as though his own gift has only one direction: toward conflict, toward battle, toward the moment when peace breaks apart. This realization troubles him, because deep inside, Ares does not want to be only feared. He wants to matter. He wants the gods to look upon him and see more than destruction. Yet every time he displays his strength, others become cautious. Every time his emotions rise, others step away. The very power that defines him also separates him. And then, standing within the halls of Olympus, he encounters the one person who will challenge him more than any enemy ever could: Athena. You see her approach beneath the quiet glow of the divine halls. Unlike Ares, she does not arrive with the sound of weapons or the energy of a storm. She moves with calm confidence. Her presence feels controlled, deliberate, almost impossible to disturb. Ancient Greeks imagined Athena as a goddess born from wisdom itself. She represented strategy, careful thought, and disciplined courage. She was a warrior, but not because she loved battle. She fought because she understood what was at stake. This difference immediately separates her from Ares. Ares saw the battlefield as a place where strength revealed itself. Athena saw the battlefield as a place where decisions carried consequences. The two gods looked at the same world and saw different truths. You can imagine their first disagreements beneath the towering columns of Olympus. Ares speaks of courage. Athena speaks of preparation. Ares speaks of warriors charging forward. Athena speaks of knowing when not to fight. Neither completely understands the other. And perhaps that was the reason their rivalry became so powerful. They were not opposites because one was good and the other was evil. They were opposites because they represented two different parts of humanity: the heart and the mind, the impulse and the plan, the flame and the lamp that guides it. As time passes, Ares begins measuring himself against Athena. He watches heroes seek her guidance. He hears mortals praise her wisdom. He notices that even great warriors often turn to Athena before entering dangerous battles. A quiet frustration grows within him. Why did mortals admire the one who planned the battle more than the one who fought inside it? Why did they honor the strategist but fear the warrior? These questions become a wound that follows Ares throughout his existence. But beneath his jealousy, there is something else. Respect. Because even Ares understands that Athena possesses something he does not. Control. She can stand beside conflict without being consumed by it. She can hold power without allowing power to control her. This is a lesson Ares has not yet learned. One evening, you walk with Ares along the outer edges of Olympus. Below the mountain, the world of mortals stretches beneath a sky filled with stars. Small fires glow in distant villages. Ships move slowly across dark seas. Farmers rest beside their fields after long days of work. The world appears peaceful. But Ares knows that beneath every peaceful moment, conflict can return. A disagreement between kings, a struggle over land, a wounded pride, a forgotten promise. The seeds of war can exist anywhere. This awareness gives him a strange connection to mortals. Unlike some gods who remain distant from human suffering, Ares understands the emotions that lead people toward desperation. He understands anger. He understands fear. He understands the desire to protect something precious. But he also understands revenge, and that is where danger begins. Ancient traditions often portrayed Ares as a warning about uncontrolled emotion. The Greeks did not simply tell stories about him to celebrate war. They used him to explore a difficult question. What happens when a powerful force has no restraint? Ares was not terrifying because he was weak. He was terrifying because he was strong. And strength without wisdom could become something impossible to stop. Some surviving interpretations suggest that Ares was honored by warriors who saw him as a reminder of bravery. Others viewed him more cautiously, seeing him as a symbol of the destruction that follows when anger takes command. The disagreement itself reveals the complexity of his character. Even the ancient world could not decide what Ares truly represented. Perhaps that uncertainty was intentional. Perhaps the Greeks understood that war itself could never be reduced to a single meaning. It could be heroic. It could be tragic. It could defend a home. It could destroy one. And Ares carried all of those contradictions within him. As seasons pass over Olympus, the young god continues to grow. His armor becomes heavier. His reputation spreads. Warriors begin speaking his name before battles. Songs are created about his fury. But inside, another struggle quietly develops. Ares wants to prove himself. He wants to defeat Athena's image of perfect wisdom. He wants the world to understand that passion has value. Yet destiny is preparing a lesson that no weapon can teach. A warning begins appearing in the dreams of ancient seers. They speak of a god who will discover that the greatest victory is not defeating an enemy. It is mastering oneself. The meaning of this vision remains unclear. Some believe it was a prophecy of Ares' future struggles. Others believe it was a reminder that even immortals cannot escape their own nature. But as the young god looks across the endless valleys below Olympus, he does not yet understand. The battles waiting for him will not only test his strength, they will test his heart. And soon, Ares will step into the world beyond divine halls, where his name will no longer belong only to gods. It will belong to warriors, to kingdoms, to generations of mortals who will call upon him when the drums of war begin to sound. You leave the quiet heights of Olympus and follow Ares downward, toward the lands where mortals live beneath uncertain skies. The mountains become smaller behind you. The cold air of the divine realm gives way to the warmth of valleys, forests, and ancient cities built beside rivers and seas. Here, the world is different. Mortals do not possess eternal lives. They do not have endless time to understand themselves. Every choice matters because every moment is precious. And this is where Ares begins to feel the pull of his true domain, the battlefield. You stand beside him as he walks through lands preparing for conflict. The scent of smoke rises from distant camps. Bronze armor reflects the fading sunlight. Horses move restlessly beneath leather harnesses. Warriors sharpen their spears, while quiet prayers are whispered beside small fires. The night before battle is always filled with strange emotions: fear, hope, doubt, determination. Ares understands these feelings better than any other god. He hears the heartbeat beneath the armor. He feels the tension in the hands holding weapons. He knows the moment when a person must decide whether courage is stronger than fear. This is where he feels powerful, not in the golden halls of Olympus, not among immortal conversations, but among those who stand at the edge of uncertainty. The ancient Greeks imagined Ares moving across battlefields with incredible force. He was not a distant observer watching events unfold from the heavens. He entered the chaos himself. The clash of shields, the cries of warriors, the thunder of footsteps, the storm of emotions. These were the sounds that followed him. You can imagine the first great battles where mortals call upon his name. Before dawn, warriors gather beneath dark skies. A priest raises a torch beside an altar. The flames move in the wind. The smell of oil and burning herbs fills the air. They ask for victory. They ask for strength. They ask to return home alive. But Ares knows something they do not. Every victory carries a cost. Every battle leaves something behind. A fallen friend, a ruined field, a memory that refuses to disappear. The god of war begins to discover the contradiction at the center of his existence. Mortals praise him when they believe war will bring glory, but they curse him when war takes away what they love. Ares becomes the god people call upon before battle and blame afterward. A strange burden for an immortal, yet he accepts it, because he believes this is what gives him meaning. Unlike Zeus, who rules through authority, or Athena, who guides through wisdom, Ares finds his purpose through action. He wants to prove that his power has value. He wants to show Olympus that his nature is not merely destructive. He wants to become something greater than the fears surrounding his name. But the battlefield is a dangerous teacher. It rewards strength quickly. It punishes hesitation. It creates moments of incredible bravery and moments of terrible regret. As Ares fights alongside warriors, his reputation begins to grow. Songs spread across distant lands. Stories are told around evening fires. Parents tell their children about the terrifying god, whose presence could change the fate of armies. Some describe him as unstoppable. Some describe him as frightening. Some describe him as a force of nature. But almost nobody describes him as peaceful. And perhaps this is what hurts Ares most. He is remembered for what he brings, not for what he hopes to become. You watch him return to Olympus after battles, carrying the weight of countless conflicts. The other gods see the victories. They see the strength. They see the fear he inspires. But they do not always see the cost. They do not see the silent moments afterward. They do not see Ares standing alone beneath the stars, remembering the faces of warriors who never returned. Even immortals can carry memories. Even gods can feel the weight of their own actions. This hidden side of Ares rarely appears in the simplest versions of his myths. Yet, when you look deeper, another interpretation emerges. Perhaps Ares was not only the god who loved war, perhaps he was the god who could never escape war. The difference is subtle, but it changes everything. One evening, after a great battle, Ares walks across a quiet field beneath a pale moon. The fires of the army have faded. Broken shields rest in the grass. The wind moves softly through abandoned weapons. The silence feels heavier than the battle itself. For the first time, Ares wonders whether mortals truly understand what they ask from him. Do they want courage, or do they want permission to release their anger? Do they seek protection, or do they seek revenge? The questions remain unanswered. Far away, beneath the same sky, Athena watches the aftermath of another conflict. She sees the destruction left behind and understands something Ares has not yet accepted. Winning a battle does not always mean creating peace. This difference will continue to separate them, and one day, it will place them on opposite sides of a conflict where strength alone will not decide the outcome. But before that moment arrives, Ares must continue walking the path he has chosen. The world of mortals is calling. More battles await. More prayers will rise. More warriors will speak his name. And with every victory, with every defeat, with every battlefield beneath his feet, Ares will move closer to discovering the truth hidden behind his own power. Because the greatest challenge facing the god of war will never be defeating others. It will be understanding himself. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another battle is already beginning to form. You return to the battlefield. But this time the sky is not filled with the promise of victory. The clouds above the earth are dark and heavy. The wind moves across empty fields where broken shields and fallen banners remain from battles that have already ended. Ares has learned the sound of triumph. Now he must learn the sound of defeat. For a god who represents strength, defeat feels like a wound deeper than any weapon could create. You watch him stand among warriors who once celebrated his arrival. They had called upon him when they marched forward. They had believed that his presence would guarantee victory. But even the god of war cannot command every battle. Even the strongest force can be overcome. This is the lesson that begins to change Ares. Because until this moment, he believed power was proven through domination. He believed that the strongest warrior was the one who could never be stopped. But defeat introduces another possibility. Perhaps true strength is not avoiding failure. Perhaps true strength is discovering what remains after failure. The ancient Greeks understood this idea deeply. Their heroes were rarely perfect. They suffered losses. They made mistakes. They faced impossible challenges. What made them memorable was not that they never fell. It was that they continued after falling. But Ares was not a mortal hero. He was a god. And immortals often struggle with lessons that humans understand through experience. You stand beside him after a battle where another divine force has defeated him. The details of these conflicts changed across different ancient traditions, but one theme remained constant. Ares could be powerful, yet he was not unbeatable. One famous tradition tells of Ares being wounded during the Trojan War by the hero Diomedes, who was aided by Athena. In this moment, the god of war experiences something deeply humiliating. He feels pain. He feels vulnerability. He feels the shock of discovering that even divine strength has limits. Imagine the silence afterward. The battlefield that once echoed with his name becomes distant. The warriors who once looked to him now see something unexpected. The god can fall. The god can suffer. The god can lose. For Ares, this moment is not simply a physical defeat. It is a challenge to his identity. If he is not always victorious, then who is he? You follow him back toward Olympus beneath a sky without stars. The mountain paths are cold. The marble halls feel quieter than before. The other gods continue their immortal lives. But Ares carries a new feeling within him. Humiliation. And humiliation is a dangerous emotion. It can become wisdom, or it can become anger. For Ares, it becomes both. He begins to understand that brute strength has limits. But instead of immediately accepting this lesson, part of him grows more determined to prove himself. He wants to erase the memory of defeat. He wants the others to forget the moment when he fell, especially Athena. Because Athena was there, she represented everything Ares struggled to understand. Control, strategy, patience, the qualities he often ignored. This deepened their rivalry. Ares did not simply resent Athena because she defeated him. He resented what she represented, a different path, a reminder that strength without wisdom could become weakness. Yet somewhere beneath his pride, another emotion existed. Respect, because Ares knew Athena's power was real. He knew she possessed something rare. She could walk through war without becoming consumed by it. Ares could not. And perhaps this was the beginning of a painful awareness. The battlefield gave him purpose, but it also trapped him. Ancient stories often show Ares returning again and again to conflict. Some interpretations suggest this was because he loved war. Others suggest something more complicated. Perhaps he returned because war was the only place where he understood himself. The battlefield accepted him. The battlefield did not ask him to be different. The battlefield did not compare him to Athena. It simply allowed him to exist. You can imagine Ares standing beside a sacred fire late at night, listening to the distant sounds of warriors preparing for another campaign. The flames reflect against his bronze armor. The smell of burning wood fills the air. A messenger arrives with a warning. Another conflict is approaching. Another kingdom is preparing for war. Another generation of mortals will soon experience the power he represents. Ares looks toward the horizon. The old excitement returns. But now something else is present. Doubt. A mysterious dream visits him that night. He sees a battlefield covered not with weapons, but with flowers growing through the soil. Ancient trees rise where armies once marched. Children walk through fields where warriors once fought. A voice whispers that every battle eventually becomes a memory. But memories can either become lessons or become wounds that never heal. When Ares awakens, the meaning remains unclear. Some would say the dream was a warning. Others would say it was a glimpse of the future. Perhaps even the gods could not know, because destiny was not always a road written clearly before them. Sometimes destiny was the result of every choice made along the way. Ares continues forward. He continues fighting. He continues seeking the recognition he believes he deserves. But the taste of defeat has changed something inside him. The young god who once believed victory was everything now carries a hidden question. What if winning is not enough? What if the greatest battle is not against an enemy? What if it is against the part of yourself that refuses to change? Far beyond Olympus, new legends are beginning to rise. New warriors will carry swords and shields. New kingdoms will seek divine favor. And soon, Aries will discover that being feared is not the same as being loved. You follow Aries away from the crowded halls of Olympus and into the distant lands where mountains stretch beneath endless skies. Here, the world feels older and wilder. The forests are deeper, the winds are stronger, the villages are smaller. The voices of mortals rise from places far beyond the golden paths of the gods. This is where Aries begins to discover something unexpected, a place where he belongs, not among the perfect marble halls of Olympus, not among the endless debates of immortals, but among the warriors who live at the edge of uncertainty. You walk beside him through ancient landscapes where the earth is rough beneath your feet. Tall grasses move with the wind. The scent of pine forests fills the air. In the distance, mountains rise like silent guardians, watching over forgotten kingdoms. These regions are often associated with the worship of Ares, especially the lands of Thrace. To many Greeks, Thrace was a place of fierce warriors, untamed nature, and distant traditions. It was different from the civilized centers of Greece, and perhaps that difference reflected Ares himself, a god who never fully felt at home among the Olympians, a god who represented the forces that civilization tried to control but could never completely remove. You see warriors gathering beneath dark skies. Their shields rest beside small fires. Their armor carries marks from previous battles. Before they march, they speak prayers into the night. They do not ask for comfort. They do not ask for easy victories. They ask for courage. They ask for endurance. They ask for the strength to face whatever waits beyond the horizon. And when they call upon Ares, he listens, because he understands them. These warriors are not perfect heroes. They are afraid. They know they may not return. They know their names may disappear into history. Yet they walk forward anyway. This is the part of humanity that draws Ares closer. The willingness to stand despite fear. The choice to fight when everything feels uncertain. The courage hidden inside ordinary people. For a moment, Ares feels something he rarely experiences on Olympus. Acceptance. Among these warriors, nobody asks why he carries anger. Nobody tells him that his emotions are too dangerous. Nobody compares him to Athena. Here, his intensity is not a weakness. It is a gift. But even in this place, a question follows him. Can a god of war ever truly protect those who worship him? Or does his very nature bring the destruction they fear? The ancient world wrestled with this contradiction. Warriors needed strength. Kings needed armies. Cities needed defenders. But every war also created suffering. Every victory left someone grieving. Every battlefield created memories that could not easily disappear. Ares existed within this impossible balance. He was necessary, but he was also dangerous. You watch him walk through villages where people prepare for war. Mothers embrace sons before they leave. Fathers sharpen weapons passed down through generations. Young warriors imagine glory while older warriors remember the cost. Ares sees all of it. The excitement, the fear, the hope, the sorrow. Perhaps this is when he begins to understand mortals more deeply than many other gods. Because Ares does not stand above human emotion, he lives inside it. He knows what it means to feel anger. He knows what it means to want recognition. He knows what it means to struggle with a destiny that seems impossible to escape. In some ways, the god of war is one of the most human gods of Olympus, and perhaps that is why his story remains powerful. He is not distant perfection. He is conflict. He is contradiction. He is the struggle between what we are and what we wish to become. As seasons pass, Ares becomes a figure known across different lands. Some warriors honor him with respect. Some communities fear his influence. Some traditions portray him as fierce and violent. Others see him as a protector who stands beside those defending their homes. The image changes depending on who tells the story. And perhaps that uncertainty reveals something important. Ares was never only one thing. A god of war could never be simple. War itself was never simple. A kingdom fighting for survival saw courage. A kingdom suffering invasion saw tragedy. The same battlefield could hold both stories at once. One evening, as the sun disappears behind distant mountains, Ares stands alone beside a quiet shoreline. The waves move slowly against the rocks. The smell of salt fills the cold night air. Above him, countless stars appear across the darkness. For a rare moment, there are no armies, no battles, no prayers, only silence. And in that silence, Ares feels something unfamiliar, loneliness, because even among those who worship him, he remains separate. Mortals admire the idea of war, but they do not truly know the god who carries it. The other Olympians respect his power, but they do not always understand his heart. Ares has become the protector of warriors, yet he has no true home. A mysterious sign appears before dawn. The first rays of sunlight reveal a fallen tree beside the shore, its roots exposed beneath the earth. Carved into the wood by time itself are markings that resemble ancient symbols of conflict and peace intertwined. Some would interpret this as a message from the gods. Others would see only nature's quiet design. But to Ares, it feels like a question. Can something born from destruction also create something meaningful? The answer remains hidden, because his greatest lessons have not yet arrived. Soon, Ares will discover that even a god who belongs to battle can be changed by something far more powerful than war, love. And when that moment comes, the warrior without a home will finally find a place where his heart can rest, even if only for a short time. You return to Olympus beneath a sky painted with the soft colors of evening. The golden light of the setting sun touches the marble halls, and the mountain winds carry the scent of wildflowers from the valleys below. For centuries, Ares has been known through one image: a warrior, a storm, a force that arrives when peace disappears. But now, you are about to see the part of Ares that few stories remember, the part beneath the armor, the part that longs not for victory, but for connection. Because even the god of war could desire something that battles could never provide: to be understood. You watch Ares move through the halls of Olympus, carrying the weight of his reputation. The other gods know his strength. Mortals know his name. Warriors call upon him when they face danger. But admiration is not the same as affection. Respect is not the same as belonging. Ares has spent much of his existence proving that he is powerful. Yet somewhere deep within him, another question remains. Who would love him if he was not a god of war? This question begins to change when he encounters Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, desire, and attraction. At first glance, they appear completely different. Ares represents conflict. Aphrodite represents harmony. Ares carries the sound of marching armies. Aphrodite carries the whispers of lovers. Ares belongs to the battlefield. Aphrodite belongs to gardens, temples, and celebrations. Yet perhaps this difference is exactly what draws them together, because ancient myths often reveal a strange truth. Opposites are sometimes connected by the very things that separate them. You walk through a sacred garden beneath the moonlight. Cypress trees move gently in the wind. The scent of roses fills the air. Small lamps burn beside marble statues. The peaceful atmosphere feels far removed from the battlefields where Ares usually walks. Here, there are no weapons, no armies, no cries of victory, only quiet. And in this quiet place, Ares experiences something unfamiliar: peace. Aphrodite does not look at him only as the god of war. She sees the being behind the title. She sees the loneliness hidden beneath the strength. She sees the emotions that Ares has spent centuries trying to conceal. This changes him, because for the first time, someone does not ask him to become different. Someone simply understands him. Their relationship became one of the most famous connections in Greek mythology. Ancient poets told different versions of their story. Some described their bond as a secret romance. Others explored it as a symbolic union between opposing forces: love and war, desire and conflict, creation and destruction. The meaning behind their relationship was deeper than simple attraction. It reflected a truth the Greeks recognized about human nature. The strongest emotions often exist beside their opposites. People can love and fight. They can create and destroy. They can seek peace while carrying anger inside themselves. Ares and Aphrodite represented these contradictions. You watch Ares change during this period. The warrior who once searched only for recognition begins to experience something else: vulnerability. He begins to understand that power does not always come from being feared. Sometimes power comes from allowing someone to see your weaknesses. But this lesson is difficult, especially for a god who has spent eternity wearing armor. Because armor protects, but armor also separates. The more Ares opens himself to Aphrodite, the more he risks losing the identity he has built. The warrior, the unstoppable force, the god who never shows doubt. Ancient myths often remind us that love creates both joy and danger. A person who opens their heart becomes vulnerable to loss, and Ares, despite his divine nature, is not free from this truth. His relationship with Aphrodite also creates tension among the gods. Aphrodite was connected to another divine marriage, and their secret bond became a source of conflict. In some traditions, the craftsman god Hephaestus discovered their relationship and exposed them before the other Olympians. The story carries many meanings. Some ancient audiences saw it as a tale of betrayal and humiliation. Others saw a symbolic clash between different forces. Hephaestus represented creation, craftsmanship, and patience. Ares represented passion and impulse. Their conflict reflected a deeper question. What happens when desire ignores responsibility? You watch Ares experience another kind of battle. Not one fought with shields, not one fought with spears, but one fought within the heart. Because winning a battlefield is easier than protecting a relationship. A warrior can defeat an enemy, but can he overcome his own pride? Can he control jealousy? Can he accept consequences? These are battles Ares cannot solve through strength alone. One night, as Ares rests beneath the stars, a dream comes to him. He sees himself standing on an empty battlefield. His armor lies beside him. His weapons rest untouched on the ground. Across from him stands another version of himself. Younger, angrier, still searching for approval. The younger Ares asks a question. Without war, who are you? The god cannot answer. When he awakens, the dream remains. Ancient traditions often use dreams as moments when hidden truths could rise from within the soul. Whether this dream came from the gods or from Ares himself remains uncertain. But the message is clear. The warrior must discover the person beneath the armor. The relationship with Aphrodite becomes one of the few moments where Ares moves closer to that discovery. Through love, he experiences tenderness. Through affection, he experiences vulnerability. Through connection, he begins to understand that strength is not only the ability to endure pain, strength is also the courage to be known. But destiny rarely allows even the gods to remain in peace for long. The same emotions that brought Ares closer to happiness will soon create new conflicts. The same passion that gave him comfort will also expose his weaknesses. Because love and war have always shared something in common. Both can change the course of a life forever. And as the seasons turn over Olympus, another challenge begins to rise. A battle unlike any Ares has faced before. A battle where even divine strength may not be enough. You return to the quiet gardens of Olympus, where the night air carries the fragrance of roses and olive blossoms. The moon hangs above the marble terraces, casting silver light across fountains carved by ancient hands. The world feels peaceful here. But beneath this peaceful surface, powerful emotions are moving. Love, pride, jealousy, desire. The very forces that can create the greatest happiness can also create the deepest wounds. And now, you watch Ares discover this truth. For the first time in his immortal life, the god of war has found something that makes him feel more than power. He has found something worth protecting. Aphrodite. You see them together, away from the noise of Olympus, away from battles, away from the expectations placed upon them by other gods. With Aphrodite, Ares is not simply a warrior. He is not a weapon. He is not a symbol. He is simply himself. The ancient Greeks understood that love was not always gentle. Desire could inspire poetry and devotion, but it could also create rivalry, betrayal, and suffering. Aphrodite represented this complicated nature of attraction. She was beauty. She was longing. She was the irresistible force that could bring people together or pull them apart. And perhaps this was why she connected so deeply with Ares. Because both gods represented powerful emotions that humans struggled to control. War and desire. Two forces that could overwhelm reason. Two forces that could transform ordinary lives forever. You walk with Ares through hidden valleys where the stars shine above ancient temples. The sounds of Olympus fade behind you. The only sounds are the wind through the trees and the distant movement of water. Here, Ares begins to experience a different kind of strength. The strength of tenderness. He learns that protecting someone is not always about standing in battle. Sometimes it is about listening. Sometimes it is about patience. Sometimes it is about allowing another person to see the fears hidden beneath your confidence. For a god who had spent centuries proving himself, this was a difficult lesson. Because Ares knew how to fight enemies, he knew how to challenge rivals. He knew how to survive conflict, but he did not know how to surrender control. And love required surrender. This created a quiet struggle within him. Part of Ares wanted to remain the unstoppable warrior feared across the ancient world. Another part wanted the simple comfort of being accepted. The two sides of his nature began pulling against each other, the warrior and the person beneath the warrior. Ancient stories about Ares and Aphrodite were not only romantic tales, they were also symbolic stories about the relationship between opposing forces, conflict and attraction, violence and creation, passion and consequence. Some interpretations suggest that the Greeks understood these forces as connected rather than separate. The same intensity that drives humans toward battle can also drive them toward love. The heart that burns with anger can also burn with devotion. The spirit that seeks victory can also seek connection. Ares represented the fire. Aphrodite represented the desire that shapes where the fire moves. But even the brightest flames can become dangerous. You watch as their relationship creates tension among the gods. The other Olympians observe the consequences of their actions. The divine world, like the mortal world, is not free from judgment. Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship and creation, becomes connected to their story through ancient traditions. Some versions describe him as Aphrodite's husband, and stories tell of the moment he discovers her relationship with Ares. The image is powerful. The god who creates magnificent weapons and divine treasures discovers a betrayal involving the god who uses weapons in war. Creation faces destruction. Patience faces impulse. The careful hands of the craftsman meet the restless heart of the warrior. You can imagine the tension within Olympus. The sacred fires burn lower. The conversations become quieter. The gods who once celebrated their immortality are reminded that even divine beings can suffer emotional wounds. Ares, who had faced armies without hesitation, now faces something much more difficult: shame. Because battle wounds disappear. But wounds of the heart can remain for centuries. This moment reveals another hidden side of Ares. He is not emotionless. He is not simply violence given form. He feels deeply, perhaps too deeply. His anger comes from passion. His pride comes from insecurity. His desire for victory comes from the fear of being forgotten. The more you understand Ares, the more complicated he becomes. He is not a monster standing outside humanity. He is a reflection of humanity, the part of every person that wants to be recognized, the part that fears rejection, the part that searches for someone who understands. One evening, after the conflict surrounding Aphrodite grows quieter, Ares returns alone to the edge of Olympus. The mountains are covered in darkness. The stars shine above him. The world below continues turning, unaware of the struggles of immortals. A messenger arrives with a strange warning. The gods have noticed a change in Ares. He is becoming less predictable. Some believe love has weakened him. Others believe love has revealed his true strength. The meaning of the sign remains uncertain. Was Ares losing the identity that made him powerful, or was he finally discovering the person hidden beneath that identity? Ancient storytellers never fully answered. Perhaps they understood something deeper. Change rarely feels like strength while it is happening. Sometimes transformation feels like losing the person you once were. But Ares was not finished changing. The lessons of love would remain with him. The pain would remain. The memories would remain. And soon, the god of war would face another challenge that would test whether he was truly only a force of destruction. A threat would rise against Olympus itself. And when the giants came, Ares would discover that even the most feared warrior sometimes needs others beside him. Because no battle, not even a divine one, is ever fought alone. You stand beneath a sky unlike any you have seen before. The peaceful blue of ordinary days has disappeared. Dark clouds gather above Olympus. The mountain winds move with unusual force. The sacred fires burning within the temples flicker and bend as if they sense something approaching. The gods are uneasy. Something ancient has awakened. Something powerful enough to challenge the immortals themselves. You look toward the distant horizon, where the earth seems restless. The ground trembles beneath your feet. The forests grow silent. Even the birds seem to disappear from the skies. Ares feels it before anyone speaks. A battle is coming. But this time, the enemy is not a mortal army, not a rival kingdom, not a warrior seeking glory. This time, the threat reaches toward the foundations of Olympus itself. The giants have risen. Ancient Greek traditions tell different versions of the great conflicts between the Olympian gods and the giants. These stories were preserved through poetry, temple traditions, and artistic representations, although details changed across regions. The central idea remained. The old forces of the world challenged the new order of the gods, and Ares would be forced to discover what kind of warrior he truly was. You follow him as he prepares for battle. The armor feels familiar against his body. The weight of the shield rests upon his arm. The spear shines beneath the light of the stormy sky. For centuries, this was the moment he had believed defined him. The battlefield, the enemy, the chance to prove his strength. But something is different now. Ares is no longer the young god searching only for recognition. He has experienced defeat. He has experienced love. He has experienced the loneliness hidden behind power. The warrior who enters this battle carries memories that did not exist before, and those memories begin to change him. You watch Olympus prepare for war. Zeus gathers the gods beneath the thunderous skies. Athena studies the movements of their enemies. Poseidon prepares the power of the seas. Apollo and Artemis stand ready with their divine abilities. For once, Ares is not fighting alone. This matters more than he expects, because much of his life had been shaped by the belief that strength meant standing apart. Now, he begins to understand something different. Strength can also mean standing beside others. The giants represent a force of chaos, threatening the divine order. They are enormous beings connected to the ancient powers of the earth. Their arrival creates fear even among immortals. You hear the sound of their footsteps shaking valleys. You see mountains disturbed by their movement. You feel the cold air before the storm arrives. And then the battle begins. The earth becomes a place of fire and thunder. Lightning tears across the heavens. Waves rise from distant seas. The sound of weapons echoes through the mountains. Ares enters the battlefield with the fury that made him famous. He moves like a storm. His spear strikes with incredible force. His presence inspires warriors. The other gods see why mortals have always feared and respected him. This is his domain. This is where he belongs. But the battle reveals something unexpected. Even the greatest warrior cannot win through anger alone. The giants are not defeated by strength only. They require cooperation, strategy, and sacrifice. Each god contributes something different. Athena's wisdom, Zeus' authority, Poseidon's power, the courage of many working together. Ares watches this unfold, and slowly, a lesson begins forming. The qualities he once believed made him superior are not enough by themselves. The battlefield does not belong to rage alone. It belongs to everyone who understands what they are fighting for. This realization does not come easily. Ares has spent ages believing that emotion was his greatest strength. Now he begins to see that emotion must have direction. A flame without control destroys everything around it. But a flame guided carefully can become a source of warmth and light. The ancient Greeks often used stories of divine battles to explore human experiences. The conflict between gods and giants was not only about monsters and heroes. It was about order and chaos, about civilization and destruction, about the constant struggle to create balance in a world where powerful forces are always moving. Ares represented one of those forces, the energy that can defend a city, the anger that can destroy one, the courage that can save lives, the fury that can end them. During the battle, a strange omen appears as Ares strikes against the giants. A sudden silence falls over the battlefield. For a brief moment, the storm disappears. The winds stop moving. The flames become still. Above Olympus, a single eagle circles through the clouds. To ancient Greeks, signs in nature were often interpreted as messages from the divine. Some would have seen this as a promise of victory. Others might have believed it was a warning, a reminder that every victory carries a responsibility. Ares notices the sign, and for the first time, he wonders not only whether he can win, but what kind of victory he wants. The battle continues for many days in some traditions, and eventually the Olympian gods overcome the giants. Olympus remains standing. The divine order survives, but Ares does not leave unchanged, because this battle teaches him something no enemy ever could. A warrior is not defined only by the enemies he defeats. A warrior is also defined by the people he protects. As the final echoes of battle disappear, Ares stands among the ruins of the battlefield. The air smells of smoke and rain. The ground beneath him is covered with the marks of conflict. He looks toward the other gods. For once, he does not feel separate. He does not feel like an outsider. He fought beside them. He shared their struggle. He contributed something valuable. But the old doubts remain, because victory can heal some wounds. It cannot erase all of them. Ares has proven his strength. Yet another question still waits within him. Can the god of war create something beyond battle? Can he become more than the force that appears when everything falls apart? The answer remains hidden, because the greatest challenges of Ares' existence will not come from giants, monsters, or armies. They will come from the choices he makes when there is no enemy to fight. And far beyond Olympus, a new age of heroes is beginning. Soon, mortals will tell stories of warriors whose names will echo through eternity. And Ares will discover that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones where a god must choose what kind of legend he wishes to leave behind. You return to a battlefield beneath a restless sky, where the earth remembers every footstep that has crossed it. The morning mist hangs low over the fields. Broken spears rest among wild grasses. The scent of damp soil mixes with the fading smoke of distant fires. Here, two divine forces are about to meet, not because they hate each other, not because one represents good and the other evil, but because they represent two different truths about war. Ares, Athena, the warrior and the strategist. The storm and the calm before the storm. You watch Ares stand beneath the grey sky, his armor reflecting the pale light of dawn. Around him, warriors whisper his name. They feel his presence like a fire burning inside their hearts. He is everything they imagine war to be. Powerful, fearless, unstoppable. But across the battlefield stands Athena. She does not arrive with anger. She does not need to. Her strength comes from understanding. Her eyes observe everything, every movement, every weakness, every possibility. This difference between them has existed since their earliest days on Olympus. Ares believed that victory belonged to those with the greatest force. Athena believed that victory belonged to those who understood the moment when force should be used. The conflict between them became one of the most meaningful contrasts in Greek mythology. Because the Greeks themselves understood war in two ways. War could be the desperate struggle of warriors protecting their homes, or war could become endless destruction created by pride and ambition. Ares represented the first impulse. Athena represented the second thought. You stand beside Ares as the battle begins. The sound of bronze fills the air. Shields collide. Weapons move through the morning mist. The ground trembles beneath the movement of armies. Ares enters the fight with the power that made him famous. His anger gives him speed. His passion gives him strength. Every movement carries the intensity of a god who has never learned to hold back. For a moment, it seems impossible to stop him. This is the Ares that mortals fear, the force that arrives before reason returns. But Athena does not meet him with the same energy. She waits, she watches, she understands. And slowly, Ares begins to realize something frustrating. Athena is not stronger than him in the way he expected. She is simply prepared for him. Every movement he makes follows his emotions. Every attack reveals his intentions. Every moment of anger creates an opening. The very passion that gives Ares power also makes him predictable. This is the lesson he has struggled to accept throughout his life. Strength without control can become weakness. You can imagine the frustration within him. He has faced armies. He has challenged monsters. He has stood beside gods during cosmic battles. Yet here, against Athena, he faces the one opponent who forces him to confront himself. Not his armor, not his weapons, not his reputation, himself. Ancient stories often use the rivalry between Ares and Athena as a reflection of human society. A warrior without wisdom can cause destruction. Wisdom without courage can become powerless. The Greeks did not see one as completely replacing the other. A city needed both. A person needed both, the courage to act, and the wisdom to know when action was necessary. But Ares had spent much of his existence avoiding this balance, because balance required something difficult. Humility. Ares had always wanted recognition. He wanted others to see his value. He wanted Olympus to understand that his power mattered. But humility required accepting that another person could possess something you did not. And for Ares, Athena represented that truth. During the battle, a strange omen appears. The wind suddenly changes direction. The dust rising from the battlefield moves away from Ares and toward Athena's side. Ancient warriors often looked for meaning in such signs. Some would have believed the gods were revealing their favor. Others might have interpreted it as a reminder that victory does not always belong to the strongest force. Perhaps the wind itself carried a message. Perhaps nature simply moved as it always had. But to those watching, the moment felt significant. The battle continues, and eventually, Athena's strategy overcomes Ares' fury. The result is not simply a victory for one god. It is a lesson for the other. Ares feels the weight of defeat again, but this defeat is different from before. The first time he lost, he felt only humiliation. This time, something else appears: understanding. He begins to see why Athena was respected, not because she avoided battle, but because she understood its consequences. She knew that every decision on the battlefield affected lives beyond the moment of victory. Families, cities, future generations. Ares had always seen the battle itself. Athena saw everything that came after. This realization does not erase their rivalry. In many ways, it deepens it, because now Ares no longer sees Athena only as someone who challenges him. He sees her as someone who reveals the parts of himself he has ignored. A mirror. A difficult one, but an important one. Later, as night falls over the battlefield, Ares stands alone beneath the stars. The fires of the armies burn quietly in the distance. The sounds of warriors slowly disappear. He thinks about Athena, about their differences, about the path he has followed, and about the god he wants to become. A mysterious dream visits him before dawn. He sees two temples standing beside each other. One is built from weapons. The other is built from books and symbols of wisdom. But over time, both temples begin to crumble when they stand alone. Then slowly, they are rebuilt together. The meaning remains uncertain. Some believe the dream was a prophecy. Others believe it was Ares finally understanding himself. But one truth becomes clear. The god of war cannot escape the need for wisdom, and wisdom cannot exist without courage. Ares has spent centuries trying to prove that his way was the only way. Now, he begins to understand something deeper. There are many forms of strength. The warrior who charges forward, the strategist who chooses the moment, the protector who knows when to fight, the leader who knows when to stop. The battle with Athena does not end Ares' story. It transforms it, because from this moment onward, every conflict will carry a new question. Not simply, can Ares win? But, what kind of victory is worth achieving? And far away, beyond the borders of Olympus, heroes are beginning their own journeys. They will call upon gods. They will face impossible choices. And Ares will soon discover that his greatest influence may not come from the battles he fights himself. It may come from the warriors who carry his name into legend. You follow Ares away from the great battles of the gods and into a different age, an age of heroes. An age when mortals begin telling stories that will survive long after kingdoms disappear. The names of warriors, kings, and champions rise like sparks from ancient fires. Their journeys become songs. Their victories become legends. Their failures become lessons passed from one generation to the next. And through all of these stories, Ares watches, sometimes from the shadows, sometimes from the battlefield, sometimes through the prayers whispered by warriors before they step into danger. The god of war has become something more complicated than a simple symbol of conflict. He has become a presence beside humanity's greatest struggles. You walk through ancient cities surrounded by stone walls and shining temples. The streets are filled with merchants, craftsmen, farmers, and soldiers. The smell of fresh bread mixes with the scent of olive oil and burning incense. Life continues, but beneath the peaceful rhythm of ordinary days, there is always the possibility of war, a border dispute, a broken alliance, a king seeking greater power, a family defending its honor. The ancient world lived close to conflict, and because of this, Ares remained close to humanity. Unlike some gods who represented distant ideals, Ares was connected to moments when humans faced their deepest fears. The moment before battle, the moment when someone must decide whether to stand or flee, the moment when courage becomes necessary. You see warriors preparing beneath the early morning light. Their armor shines, Their hands tighten around their weapons. Some are confident, others are afraid. Ares understands both, because courage has never meant the absence of fear. Courage exists because fear exists. This was one of the reasons warriors continued honoring him. Not because every person wanted destruction, but because every person eventually faced a battle of some kind. A physical battle, an emotional battle, a struggle against impossible circumstances. The Greeks understood that war was not only fought on fields covered with weapons, it was also fought within the human heart, and Ares lived there. You watch as heroes begin to appear across the ancient world, warriors whose names would become immortal, champions who would challenge monsters, armies, and even the will of the gods. Some sought the favor of Athena, some sought the protection of Apollo, some sought the strength associated with Ares. But the relationship between Ares and heroes was never simple, because Ares did not always create heroes. Sometimes, he revealed what was already inside them. A warrior who entered battle for pride might become reckless. A warrior who entered battle to protect others might become courageous. The god of war amplified what already existed. He was the fire, but humans decided what they placed into that fire. Ancient traditions often portrayed Ares differently from the heroes who followed him. Heroes usually had a personal journey. They learned, they suffered, they changed. Ares was different. He was the eternal force, the emotion that returned again and again throughout history. The Greeks knew that humanity would always face conflict, so they created a god who would always stand near it. Yet as Ares watches heroes rise, another emotion begins to appear. Responsibility, because for the first time, he begins to understand the influence he carries. Every warrior who prayed to him carried a piece of his image. Every battle fought in his name reflected something about him. And that realization creates a burden. Because if mortals followed Ares into war, what did he owe them? Victory, strength, protection, or wisdom? These questions become more difficult as he watches heroes make choices shaped by his influence. Some fight for noble reasons. Some fight because they cannot forgive. Some fight because they desire glory. Some fight because they have lost everything else. The god of war sees all of these paths, and he begins to understand that war itself is never the entire story. The reason behind war matters. The consequences matter. The people left behind matter. This lesson slowly changes Ares. Not completely. He remains the fierce warrior. He remains the force that arrives with the sound of weapons and thunder. But something within him becomes quieter. A deeper awareness. A recognition that every battlefield contains more than victory and defeat. It contains lives. One evening, you stand with Ares beside a harbor town beneath a sky filled with stars. Ships rest gently on dark waters. Lanterns move along the shore. The smell of salt fills the cool night air. A group of young warriors gathers near a small shrine dedicated to him. They speak his name. They ask for courage. They ask to return safely. Ares listens. But this time, he hears something different. Not a request for destruction. A request for survival. A divine sign appears above the harbor. A single torch flame burns without moving, even as the sea wind passes around it. Ancient people often saw unusual moments in nature as messages from the gods. Some would interpret the steady flame as a sign of protection. Others might have believed it represented the strength of the human spirit. But Ares understands the symbol. Even fire must be controlled. A flame that spreads without purpose becomes dangerous. A flame guided carefully becomes a source of warmth. Perhaps this is what he has been trying to learn since the beginning. Strength needs direction. Power needs purpose. War needs meaning. As centuries pass, Ares continues walking among heroes and warriors. His name becomes woven into stories of courage, conflict, and survival. But the god who once believed that victory was everything now begins asking a different question. What remains after victory? The battlefield disappears. The weapons become forgotten. The kingdoms fall into dust. But the choices made during those battles continue living through memory. And Ares, the god who once only listened to the sound of war, begins listening to something else. The voices of those who endured it. The voices of those who survived. The voices of those who remembered. Yet one final challenge remains. Ares will soon face the consequences of his own nature, because even immortals cannot escape the results of their choices. And the greatest battles of his life will not always happen between armies. Some will happen inside his own heart. You return to Olympus during a quieter age, when the thunder of great battles has faded into distant memories. The marble halls still shine beneath the eternal light of the heavens. The sacred fires still burn beside ancient statues. The gods still gather beneath golden ceilings, speaking about the lives of mortals below. But Ares has changed. Not completely. The fire within him still burns. The desire for victory still exists. The warrior still waits beneath the armor. Yet something has shifted, because every battle leaves a mark. Some wounds appear on the body, others remain hidden within the soul, and even a god cannot escape the weight of what he has experienced. You walk beside Ares through the quiet chambers of Olympus. Unlike the younger god, who once searched desperately for recognition, this Ares moves with a different kind of awareness. He has seen warriors celebrate victories that later became tragedies. He has watched kings gain kingdoms only to lose everything they loved. He has witnessed courage and cruelty standing beside each other on the same battlefield. The world is no longer as simple as he once believed. When he was young, Ares thought war revealed the strongest. Now he understands that war reveals everything: fear, love, desperation, loyalty, pride, grief. Every hidden part of humanity rises when people face conflict, and Ares has spent eternity standing at the center of that storm. Perhaps this is why some ancient traditions portrayed him with complexity rather than simple admiration or hatred. He was terrifying, but he was also familiar. He represented something humans recognize within themselves: the anger that appears when something precious is threatened, the frustration of being ignored, the desire to prove that you matter, the pain of carrying emotions too powerful to control. You watch Ares return to the places where warriors once honored him. Some temples remain active. Some have disappeared beneath the passing centuries. Stone walls crumble. Forgotten paths become covered with grass. Time changes everything, even memories, and this creates a strange feeling within him, because Ares, the immortal god, begins to understand something about mortality. Humans are remembered because their time is limited. Every action matters because it cannot be repeated forever. But gods endure. They remain. They watch generations disappear. And perhaps eternity has its own kind of loneliness. Ares had always envied the passion of mortals. Now he begins to understand why. Their lives burn brightly because they are brief. A warrior who stands on a battlefield knows the next moment may be his last. A god does not have that certainty. Immortality can become its own burden. You imagine Ares standing alone beside a forgotten battlefield beneath the light of the moon. The grass has grown over the places where armies once fought. Wildflowers rise between ancient stones. The air is quiet, except for the sound of distant wind moving through the trees. He remembers the warriors who called his name, the enemies who fell, the victories that faded, the defeats that remained, for the first time. He does not see these moments only as battles. He sees them as lives. This is the hidden transformation of Ares. The warrior begins to understand the cost of war. Ancient stories often show gods as powerful beings, but they also reveal their weaknesses. Zeus struggles with pride, Poseidon struggles with anger, Hera struggles with jealousy, and Ares struggles with his own nature. His greatest enemy is not another god. It is the endless cycle inside himself, the desire to prove his strength, the fear that without conflict, he has no purpose, the longing to be respected, the fear of being forgotten. These emotions have guided him for ages, but now they begin to feel heavier. One night, Ares receives a warning through a mysterious vision. He sees a great battlefield covered in shadows. At first, he believes he is looking at another war, another challenge, another enemy. But as he approaches, he realizes something unusual. There are no armies, no weapons, no opponents, only thousands of empty helmets resting upon the ground. A voice whispers through the darkness. The greatest cost of war is not the moment of battle. It is what remains afterward. Ares wakes before dawn. The meaning of the vision is uncertain. Some ancient storytellers might have seen it as a message from the gods. Others might have viewed it as the warrior finally confronting his own thoughts. But the question remains, what does a god of war become when he begins to understand suffering? Does wisdom weaken him, or does wisdom complete him? This question follows Ares into the later years of his divine existence, because change does not always arrive through victory. Sometimes it arrives through exhaustion, through reflection, through finally seeing the world from another perspective. The young god who once chased glory now searches for meaning. The warrior who once wanted everyone to fear him now wonders whether fear was ever enough. And perhaps this is the greatest battle Ares has ever faced. Not defeating an enemy, not proving his strength, but accepting that he is more than the force he represents. Because beneath the helmet, beneath the armor, beneath the name whispered across battlefields, there is still a being who wants to be understood, and far beyond Olympus. Another chapter of his story begins to unfold, a chapter involving the legacy he leaves behind, the children connected to his name, the warriors inspired by his image, and the question that every immortal eventually faces: what will remain when the world stops speaking your name? You return to the golden halls of Olympus, where the passing of countless ages has left no mark upon the marble walls. The columns still rise toward the heavens, the sacred fires still burn, the stars still watch silently above the home of the gods. But Ares has begun to look at the world differently. Once, he searched for his own place. Once, he wanted to prove that his strength mattered. Now, he begins to understand that no being exists alone. Every action creates something beyond itself. Every choice leaves a trace. And even the god of war must face the legacy he creates. You follow Ares through ancient landscapes where his influence has spread beyond battlefields. His name is carried by warriors. His symbols appear on shields and temples. His stories are told around fires where generations gather to remember the past. But perhaps the greatest reflection of Ares is not found in weapons. It is found in those connected to him, the beings who carry parts of his nature into the world. Ancient traditions describe several children and companions associated with Ares, though different sources preserve different versions. Mythology was never a single fixed story. It was a collection of traditions shaped by different communities, each revealing another way of understanding the gods. Among those connected to Ares were figures who embodied aspects of conflict itself. Phobos, Deimos, the personifications of fear and terror. You can imagine them moving beside Ares as shadows across the battlefield. Before armies clash, fear arrives first. The heart begins racing. The hands become unsteady. The mind imagines every possible danger. The ancient Greeks understood this. War does not begin when weapons strike. It begins when fear enters the human heart. Through these figures, Ares' influence extended beyond physical combat. He represented not only the fight itself, but everything surrounding it. The anticipation, the anxiety, the emotional storm before the first attack. You watch Ares observe these forces moving through the world, and something changes within him. In the past, he saw fear as something that made warriors weak. Now, he begins to understand that fear is part of courage. A person cannot be brave without something to fear. A warrior cannot show strength without facing uncertainty. This realization brings a new kind of wisdom. Not the wisdom of Athena. Not the wisdom of strategy. A different wisdom. The wisdom gained from witnessing countless human struggles. You continue walking beside Ares through the stories of heroes and warriors who carry his influence. Some become symbols of courage. Others become warnings about uncontrolled ambition. Because the legacy of Ares is never simple. A sword can defend a home. A sword can also destroy one. A warrior can protect the innocent. A warrior can also seek glory at the expense of others. The same strength can create different outcomes. And this is the lesson Ares begins passing forward. Not through speeches, not through teachings, but through the examples created by those who invoke his name. The ancient Greeks often used family relationships among gods to explain larger ideas. The children of a deity were not simply descendants. They were reflections. They revealed different parts of the force that deity represented. Through fear and terror, Ares showed the emotional reality of battle. Through warriors and heroes, he showed courage and determination. Through conflict itself, he revealed humanity's endless struggle between destruction and survival. You watch him return to a battlefield where a new generation of warriors has gathered. These soldiers have never seen the ancient battles of myth. They do not know the stories of Olympus as deeply as those who came before, but they still whisper the same prayers. They still ask for strength. They still hope to return home. Ares listens, and something unexpected happens. He does not feel pride. He feels responsibility, because he understands now that every prayer carries a human life behind it. Every warrior is someone's child, someone's friend. someone's memory waiting to be created. The god who once saw only armies now sees individuals. One evening, beneath a sky filled with stars, Ares sits beside a quiet fire. The flames move gently. The smell of burning wood fills the air. The sounds of distant warriors slowly disappear into the night. A mysterious sign appears. A young olive tree grows beside an old battlefield. Its roots push through the hardened earth where weapons once rested. To some, the sight would seem impossible. To others, it would simply be nature continuing its endless cycle. But to Ares, the symbol carries meaning. Something new can grow from places of destruction. Ancient storytellers often used plants, rivers, and natural signs as reminders that life continues beyond human conflict. Perhaps this was a message. Perhaps even the god of war could understand renewal. The meaning remains uncertain, but the image stays with him. A battlefield becoming a field of flowers, a place of sorrow becoming a place of memory, a moment of destruction becoming the beginning of something new. Ares begins to understand that legacy is not only about what people remember, it is also about what they learn. The wars of the past shape the choices of the future. The mistakes of one generation become lessons for another, and the stories of gods become mirrors through which humanity examines itself. The warrior who once believed his purpose was found only in conflict now sees a wider truth. War is part of the human story, but it is not the entire story. There is love after war. There is rebuilding after destruction. There is life after loss. And perhaps this is the greatest gift Ares unknowingly gives to humanity, not the desire for battle, but the reminder that courage is needed whenever people face hardship. As the centuries continue, Ares watches civilizations rise and disappear. Temples are built, temples fall, songs are created, songs are forgotten. But his name remains, not because war lasts forever, but because humanity has always struggled with the same questions. When should we fight? What are we willing to protect? What does victory truly mean? And as Ares looks toward the distant horizon, he senses that his final lessons are still waiting, because even after countless battles, one truth remains. The greatest challenge of war is not entering the battlefield. It is finding the wisdom to leave it. You return to a world that has grown older. The mountains of Greece still rise beneath the endless sky. The olive trees still move gently in the wind. The waves still strike ancient harbor walls beneath the moonlight. But the voices of past generations have become quieter. The warriors who once called upon Ares are gone. The kingdoms they defended have changed. The battles they fought have become stories, and Ares remains, immortal, watching, remembering. You walk beside him through places where armies once gathered. The earth beneath your feet is no longer covered with weapons. Grass has grown over forgotten battlefields. Small flowers bloom where soldiers once stood. The air carries the peaceful scent of wild herbs instead of smoke. For a god who spent eternity surrounded by conflict, this silence feels unfamiliar, and perhaps that is why it teaches him the most. Ares has finally begun to understand the truth he spent ages avoiding. War is never only about the moment of battle. The true cost appears afterward, in the empty homes, in the memories of survivors, in the names carved into stone, in the stories people tell when they remember those who never returned. You watch Ares stand beside a small village after a conflict has ended. The walls are damaged. The fields are quiet. Families gather what remains of their possessions. Children walk through streets where laughter once filled the air. There is no glory here, no songs of victory, no celebration, only what remains. And for the first time, Ares does not look away. The younger god would have seen only the battle. The older god sees the consequences. This transformation is subtle. Ares does not become another deity. He does not suddenly abandon conflict. He does not stop being the force that warriors call upon, but he begins to understand the responsibility that comes with his nature. Fire can destroy, but fire can also protect. A blade can wound, but a blade can also defend. Strength itself is not good or evil. The choice lies in how it is used. The ancient Greeks often explored this idea through their gods. Each divine figure represented powerful forces that could bring both blessings and dangers. Zeus represented authority, but authority could become tyranny. Poseidon represented the sea, but the sea could bring both travel and destruction. Aphrodite represented love, but desire could create both happiness and suffering. and Ares represented war. Not because war was always celebrated, but because humanity had always struggled with it. You continue walking with him through temples and shrines, where different communities remembered him in different ways. Some saw Ares as a fierce protector. Some viewed him with caution. Some connected him with the wildness and unpredictability of battle. Surviving evidence suggests that worship of Ares varied greatly across the Greek world. Unlike some Olympian gods who had vast networks of famous temples, Ares often occupied a more complicated position. He was respected, but not always embraced, honored, but not always loved. Perhaps this reflected the nature of war itself. People need defenders, but nobody truly wants destruction. This contradiction followed Ares throughout his existence, and perhaps he understood it better than anyone. One evening, beneath a sky filled with countless stars, Ares sits near a quiet shoreline. The sea moves slowly against the rocks. The cold night air touches his armor. The distant sound of waves replaces the sound of battle. For once, he is not waiting for conflict. He is simply listening, and in that silence, memories return. The warriors who prayed to him, the enemies he faced, the victories that faded, the losses that remained. He remembers the young god who once believed that being feared was the same as being respected. He remembers the warrior who searched for approval from Olympus. He remembers the being who discovered love through Aphrodite. He remembers the battles against gods, giants, and heroes. Every moment shaped him. Every choice created another version of himself. A mysterious dream comes to him that night. He finds himself standing before a great hall filled with ancient weapons. Swords, spears, shields, helmets. But as he walks deeper into the hall, he notices something strange. Each weapon slowly transforms. The swords become farming tools. The shields become doors. The helmets become vessels holding siege. The battlefield becomes a field. The meaning is unclear. Some would say the dream was a prophecy. Others would say it was the mind of Ares finally understanding what every war hopes to achieve. A future where weapons are no longer needed. But the answer remains hidden, because even gods cannot see every path destiny creates. When Ares awakens, he carries the dream with him. Not as a weakness, not as regret, but as understanding. The god of war has learned something important. Peace is not the absence of strength. Sometimes peace exists because someone had the courage to protect it. Ares begins to see warriors differently, not as instruments of destruction, but as people carrying impossible responsibilities. A soldier does not simply hold a weapon. A soldier holds a choice about what must be protected, a choice about what must be sacrificed. A choice about what kind of world will exist afterward. This does not erase the darker parts of Ares. He remains proud. He remains passionate. He remains connected to the emotions that created him. But now those emotions have depth. The anger has memory. The strength has responsibility. The warrior has wisdom. And perhaps this is the greatest change in Ares' long existence. He does not defeat his nature. He understands it. Because sometimes growth does not mean becoming something completely different. Sometimes growth means finally seeing the truth of what you have always been. As the centuries continue, the stories of Ares begin traveling beyond ancient Greece. New generations will interpret him in new ways. Some will see a symbol of violence. Others will see a representation of courage and struggle. But the complete story is more complicated. Ares was never only the sound of weapons. He was also the silence afterward. The moment when warriors return home. The moment when survivors rebuild. The moment when humanity asks whether the next battle can be avoided. And far beyond the borders of Olympus, a new chapter awaits. The temples will change. The prayers will fade. The world will move forward. But the image of Ares will remain. Because as long as humans struggle with conflict, they will continue searching for the meaning hidden within it. You return to the ancient world one final time, walking through landscapes where the memory of Ares once lived among ordinary people. The great cities of Greece rise beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. White marble temples shine against blue skies. Harbour towns move with the rhythm of ships and merchants. Olive groves stretch across hillsides touched by golden light. But the presence of Ares is different now. He is no longer only the god rushing toward battle. He has become a memory carried through generations. A name spoken in temples, a symbol carved into stone, a figure whose meaning changes depending on who tells his story. You walk through ancient sanctuaries where warriors once arrived before leaving for war. The air is filled with the scent of incense and burning oil. Priests move quietly beside sacred fires. Visitors place offerings before divine statues and whisper prayers beneath the open sky. Some come seeking courage. Some come seeking protection. Some come hoping that the coming battle will end in their favor. And somewhere within those prayers is the complicated presence of Ares. Because people did not turn to him only because they loved war. They turned to him because they understood fear. A farmer defending his land. A soldier protecting his city. A family waiting for someone to return. All of them knew that conflict was part of the human experience. The ancient Greeks did not live in a world where peace was guaranteed. City-states competed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Alliances changed. Generations experienced both prosperity and violence. In such a world, a god connected to war had a place. Not because war was beautiful, but because war was real. You stand inside a temple dedicated to the forces surrounding conflict. The stone beneath your feet is cool. Sunlight enters through tall openings in the walls. Dust moves slowly through the golden rays. You imagine the people who once stood here. The young warrior who came before his first battle. The older soldier who returned after many years. The family member who prayed for someone far away. Each person carried a different story. Each person saw Ares differently. This was always the mystery of the god of war. Was he a protector? Was he a destroyer? Was he a warning? Was he a necessary force? The answer depended on the person asking. Some traditions connected Ares strongly with Thrace, a region viewed by many Greeks as a land of fierce warriors and powerful traditions. In these places, Ares was sometimes associated with strength, courage, and the untamed spirit of battle. But elsewhere in Greece, his image could be more cautious. Athena often received greater admiration as the goddess of strategic warfare. She represented the controlled mind of the warrior. Ares represented the emotional force that entered the battlefield before thought could fully guide it. The contrast remained. The Greeks understood both were part of war. A battle required courage, but it also required judgment. A warrior needed passion, but also restraint. Perhaps this was why Ares remained fascinating, even when he was not the most widely celebrated Olympian. He represented something uncomfortable, something human. You continue through the remains of ancient worship places where time has changed everything. Some temples have collapsed. Some statues have disappeared. Some prayers have been forgotten. The civilizations that once honored the gods are now themselves part of history. And this creates a strange reflection. Even immortals can become memories. The stories of gods survive only because humans continue telling them. Without voices, without storytellers, without people remembering, even Olympus would become silent. Ares, who once feared being ignored, would eventually discover that memory is not created by power alone. It is created by meaning. A mysterious sign appears as you walk through an ancient sanctuary at twilight. The last light of the sun touches a weathered stone carving of Ares. The image is worn by centuries of wind and rain. The details are difficult to see. The weapon is almost gone. The armor is faded. But one thing remains. The figure still stands. Ancient people often believed that survival through time carried its own significance. A surviving statue, a surviving poem, a surviving tradition could all become messages from the past. Some would see the fading image as proof that all things eventually disappear. Others would see the standing figure as proof that some ideas endure. The meaning depends on how you look. And perhaps that is fitting for Ares, because his entire existence was built on contradiction. A god remembered through war, a warrior connected to both destruction and protection, a powerful being who spent eternity searching for understanding. You walk beyond the temples and into the cities where ordinary people lived. Here, the stories of gods became part of daily life. Children heard myths beside evening fires. Travelers carried legends between distant lands. Poets transformed ancient tales into songs. Through these stories, Ares continued changing. Every generation saw something different. One generation saw the danger of uncontrolled anger. Another saw the courage needed to face hardship. Another saw the eternal struggle between conflict and peace. The god remained the same, but humanity's understanding of him evolved. This may have been his greatest legacy. Not the battles, not the weapons, not the victories, the questions. Because Ares forced people to ask difficult things. Why do humans fight? What creates courage? When does strength become destruction? How can conflict be controlled? These questions never disappeared. They remained long after the temples became ruins. One evening, as the stars appear above the ancient Greek landscape, you imagine Ares standing quietly on a mountain overlooking the world below. No armies surround him, no weapons are raised. Only the wind, only the distant sound of the sea, only the endless movement of time. The warrior who once wanted everyone to remember his victories now understands something deeper. A person is not remembered only for the battles they win. They are remembered for the questions they leave behind. And Ares left humanity with one of the oldest questions of all. If conflict is part of human nature, can wisdom teach us how to live with it? The answer remains unfinished, because every generation must discover it again. And as the old temples fade beneath the stars, the story of Ares continues moving forward, not as a tale of endless war, but as a reminder of the fragile line between destruction and courage. You leave the ancient temples behind and walk into a world where the footsteps of warriors have become echoes. The battlefields are quiet now. The armies are gone. The banners have faded. The weapons that once carried the hopes and fears of nations have become silent reminders of another age. Yet the name of Ares remains, not because battles continue forever, but because the questions surrounding him never disappear. You stand beneath a night sky filled with stars, looking across the same landscapes where ancient Greeks once imagined gods walking among mortals. The mountains remain, the seas remain, the olive trees still move gently in the wind. The world changes, but certain human struggles remain. Fear, courage, anger, sacrifice, the desire to protect what matters. These are the forces that keep the memory of Ares alive. For many generations, people saw Ares only through the image of the battlefield. They imagined the bronze armor, the shining spear, the unstoppable warrior moving through clouds of dust and smoke. But as centuries passed, another interpretation began to emerge. Ares was not only the god who represented war, he was also a symbol of the struggle within the human soul. You follow his image beyond ancient Greece, into the stories, artworks, and interpretations created by later generations. Artists carve him into stone, writers describe him in poetry. Historians examine the surviving traditions and ask what this mysterious god truly represented. Some researchers believe that Ares reflected the fear and uncertainty surrounding warfare in ancient societies. Another interpretation survives, suggesting that he represented the courage needed when communities faced danger. Both ideas can exist together, because war itself has always carried two faces: the shield protecting a city, and the sword threatening one, the soldier defending a homeland, and the soldier seeking conquest. The moment of bravery and the aftermath of grief. Ares contained all of these contradictions. You imagine him walking through the changing centuries, watching humans create new civilizations and new conflicts. He sees kingdoms rise from the earth and disappear into memory. He sees cities filled with music and art become ruins beneath the passage of time. And perhaps this teaches him the greatest lesson of all. Nothing created through force can last forever. A kingdom built only through fear eventually falls. A victory achieved only through destruction eventually becomes empty. The ancient Greeks understood this through their own stories. Their heroes were not remembered only because they fought. They were remembered because they faced choices. They struggled. They changed. They discovered who they were. And now, Ares begins to appear in a similar way, not as a perfect god, but as a complicated one. A god who made mistakes. A god who carried pride. A god who loved deeply. A god who struggled with his own nature. This complexity is what allowed his story to survive. Perfect beings are difficult to understand, but flawed beings feel familiar. You can imagine Ares standing beside a quiet battlefield, centuries after the last warrior left. The moon shines over the empty land. Wild grass moves through broken stones. The sound of insects fills the night air. He places his hand upon the earth, and perhaps he remembers everything. Every battle, every prayer, every name forgotten by history. For the first time, He understands that every conflict was connected. One battle created another. One choice influenced another generation. One act of courage inspired another person to stand. Nothing disappeared completely. Everything became part of a larger story. A mysterious vision appears before him. He sees humanity standing at the edge of a great crossroads. On one side is a path filled with anger and endless conflict. On the other is a path filled with understanding and cooperation. But the strange part is this: both paths begin from the same place, the human heart. The meaning of the vision remains uncertain. Some might say it was a prophecy from the gods. Others might say it was Ares finally understanding the nature of the force he represented, because war does not begin with weapons. It begins with choices. The Greeks created Ares because they recognized something uncomfortable. Conflict does not come from nowhere. It comes from emotions: fear, pride, desire, revenge, the same emotions that can also create loyalty, courage, and love. This is why Ares remains such a powerful symbol. He does not allow humanity to pretend that darkness exists only outside itself. He reminds people that every person carries the possibility of both creation and destruction. The question is which one they choose. As you walk through the ruins of ancient Greece, you notice how little remains of the physical world that once worshipped Ares. Temples have fallen, statues have broken, sacred places have become archaeological discoveries. Yet the story survives. This is the strange power of mythology. The stones disappear. The ideas remain. Ares continues living because every generation encounters the same challenges he represented: the need for courage, the danger of anger, the cost of conflict, the hope for peace. Perhaps the greatest transformation of Ares is not that he becomes peaceful. It is that he becomes understandable. The young god who once wanted to be feared becomes a figure people study. The warrior who once sought victory becomes a symbol people question. The force of destruction becomes a lesson about responsibility. And maybe this was always the hidden purpose of his existence. Not to celebrate war, but to help humanity understand it. Because if people understand conflict, perhaps they can recognize it before it grows. If they understand anger, perhaps they can guide it. If they understand courage, perhaps they can use it wisely. The night grows quieter. The stars move slowly across the heavens, and somewhere beyond the boundaries of human memory, the old god of war watches the world continue, no longer only as a warrior, but as a witness, a reminder, a question that never fully disappears. What is the true measure of strength? The ability to win a battle, or the wisdom to know which battles are worth fighting? The answer belongs to every generation that remembers his name. And as the story of Ares moves toward its final chapters, the world prepares to discover how a god born from conflict became something far more lasting, a symbol of humanity itself. You leave the ancient world behind, but the presence of Ares continues traveling through time. The temples may become ruins, the marble statues may lose their original colors, the prayers once whispered beside sacred fires may become silent. Yet the idea remains, because Ares was never only a figure carved into stone. He was a reflection of something deeply human: the struggle between destruction and protection, the fear of conflict and the courage to face it, the desire to overcome an enemy and the hope that one day no enemy will be needed. You walk through the long corridors of history, watching generations encounter the image of the ancient god of war. Each age looks upon him differently. Each civilization carries its own questions. Who was Ares? A monster, a protector, a warning, a symbol? The answer changes depending on the eyes that look upon him. And perhaps this uncertainty is the reason he survives. Simple stories are often forgotten. Complicated ones remain. You imagine ancient artists shaping his image from stone and bronze. Their hands carved the details carefully: the strong body, the warrior's posture, the weapons that announce his power. But hidden inside these images is something more subtle. The artists are not only creating a god, they are creating a question. What does humanity become when strength has no limits? For centuries, philosophers, writers, and historians have returned to this question. Some researchers believe that myths surrounding Ares allowed ancient societies to explore their own relationship with violence. Rather than ignoring conflict, they gave it a face. They created a figure who could represent the emotions behind war: anger, fear, ambition, honor, the desire to survive. Another interpretation survives as well. Some see Aries as a reminder that courage itself has value. A world without the ability to defend itself can become vulnerable. Strength, when guided by responsibility, can protect what is precious. The contradiction remains, and that contradiction is what makes Aries enduring. You walk through later generations where the stories of Greek gods continue appearing in literature and art. The image of Ares changes with the centuries. Sometimes he appears as a terrifying warrior, sometimes as a symbol of human struggle, sometimes as an example of uncontrolled passion. But beneath every interpretation is the same ancient question: what separates a hero from a destroyer? The answer is not strength alone. Many beings possess strength. The difference comes from purpose. A person who fights to protect something sacred is different from someone who fights only to satisfy pride. A person who carries power responsibly is different from someone who allows power to control them. This was the lesson Ares spent his entire existence learning. You return in your imagination to the slopes of Olympus. The mountain remains covered in mist. The wind moves through the trees. The distant sound of thunder rolls across the sky. But the halls of the gods are quieter now. The age of worship has passed. The voices of ancient poets have faded. Still, the story remains. Ares stands as one of the most misunderstood figures of Greek mythology. He was often reduced to a single idea: war. But war itself was never a single thing. A war could begin with anger. It could end with peace. It could destroy a civilization. It could save one from destruction. It could reveal the worst parts of humanity. It could reveal the greatest acts of courage. Ares carried all of these possibilities. You imagine him observing humanity from beyond the boundaries of time. He watches cities rise with towers reaching toward the heavens. He watches people build bridges, create art, explore the world, and search for knowledge. But he also sees conflict return again and again. The same emotions continue appearing, the same struggles, the same choices. And perhaps this is why the story of Ares still feels alive. Because humanity has not changed as much as it believes. The weapons are different. The kingdoms are different. The languages are different. But the emotions remain familiar. Fear still exists. Pride still exists. Courage still exists. The choice between anger and understanding still exists. One night, beneath a sky filled with stars, Ares receives one final mysterious sign. He sees a battlefield from above. At first, he expects to see armies, but there are none. Instead, he sees people from different lands standing together. Former enemies share water. Broken walls are rebuilt. Fields once destroyed begin producing crops again. The vision is peaceful. But Ares notices something. The battlefield has not disappeared. It has transformed. The place of conflict has become a place of renewal. Ancient traditions often used visions like this to suggest that destiny was not always fixed. The future depended on choices made by gods and mortals alike. Perhaps this was the final message hidden within the dream. Conflict may always exist, but conflict does not have to define the ending. Ares awakens with a deeper understanding. He was never created simply to bring war. He existed because humanity needed to confront the reality of war, to recognize it, to understand it, to question it. The god of war became a lesson about peace. The warrior became a reminder about restraint. The force of anger became a symbol of the responsibility that comes with power. As the centuries move forward, Ares continues living in memory. His name appears in stories, paintings, and conversations about mythology. But the greatest legacy of Ares is not found in the battles associated with him. It is found in the questions he leaves behind. When should strength be used? When should anger be controlled? What is worth defending? What kind of victory creates a better world? These questions belong not only to gods, they belong to humanity. And perhaps that is why, after thousands of years, Ares still walks beside us, not as a figure calling humanity toward endless conflict, but as a quiet reminder of the choices hidden within every struggle. Because every person carries battles they must face, and every person must decide what kind of warrior they will become. You return one final time to the ancient mountains of Greece, where the first whispers of Ares once rose beneath the endless sky. The paths are quiet now. The temples stand as memories. The voices that once filled these sacred places have become echoes carried by the wind. Yet the story remains. Ares has traveled farther than any army, farther than any kingdom, farther than any battlefield. Because the journey of the god of war was never only about conflict. It was about understanding. You walk through the remains of ancient sanctuaries as the evening light fades across the stones. The marble is worn by centuries of rain and sunlight. Moss grows between the cracks. The scent of wild plants fills the air. The world has moved on, but something about these places still feels alive. Perhaps it is the memory of those who once stood here, the warriors who prayed, the families who waited, the people who looked toward the heavens and wondered what forces shaped their lives. Among those forces was Ares, a god who carried one of humanity's oldest struggles, the desire to be strong, and the fear of what strength can become. You think back to the beginning, the child of Olympus, who entered a world that already expected something from him, the young god who searched for approval, the warrior who believed victory would bring belonging, the immortal who discovered defeat, the lover who discovered vulnerability, the god who learned that every battle creates consequences. Every chapter of his existence shaped the being he became. Nothing was forgotten. The victories, the failures, the moments of pride, the moments of regret, all of them remained. And perhaps this is what made Ares different from many other figures of mythology. He did not represent perfection. He represented struggle. The ancient Greeks understood that struggle was a part of life. Humans were constantly balancing opposing forces, reason and emotion, peace and conflict, fear and courage, desire and responsibility. Ares lived within these contradictions. You imagine him standing beside a quiet sea beneath the stars. The waves touch the shore with a gentle rhythm. The moon reflects across the water. There are no armies nearby. No weapons are raised. No battle cries fill the night. Only silence. For a god who spent eternity surrounded by noise, this silence carries meaning. Perhaps this is the final lesson he discovers. A warrior is not only defined by the battles they enter. A warrior is also defined by the moments when they choose peace. The world often remembers victories, but victories eventually fade. Cities disappear. Empires collapse. Weapons become forgotten. What remains are the stories, the lessons, the memories, and the questions. A mysterious final omen appears in the old traditions surrounding the gods. Ares looks toward the horizon and sees the first light of dawn. The sky changes slowly. Darkness becomes gold. The stars disappear. The world awakens. To some, this would represent the endless cycle of time. To others, it would symbolize renewal. A reminder that even after the darkest night, something new begins. Perhaps this was the destiny Ares had been moving toward all along. Not becoming a god without anger. Not becoming a warrior without conflict. But becoming a figure who revealed the importance of understanding both. Because humanity does not need to pretend that conflict does not exist. Humanity needs wisdom to face it, and courage to overcome it. As centuries pass, the name of Ares continues changing. Some remember him as the fierce god of battle. Some remember him as the son of Zeus and Hera who struggled for recognition. Some remember him as the lover of Aphrodite. Some remember him as the rival of Athena. Some remember him as a symbol of the complicated nature of war itself. All of these memories contain a piece of the truth, because a life, even a divine one, cannot be reduced to a single moment. Ares was not only the battlefield, he was also the silence afterward. He was not only anger, he was also the search for meaning. He was not only destruction, he was also the strength needed to protect what matters. You look once more toward Olympus. The mountain stands beneath the evening sky. The halls of the gods are quiet. The ancient stories have traveled across thousands of years and still arrive here, in this moment, with you. Perhaps that is the true power of mythology. It allows forgotten voices to speak again. It allows ancient questions to return. It allows us to look at figures like Ares and discover something about ourselves. Because every person faces battles. Some are visible, some are hidden. Some are fought against others, some are fought within the heart. And in every battle, there is a choice. Will anger control you? Will fear define you? Will strength become destruction? Or will strength become something more? This was the question that followed Ares throughout eternity. And perhaps it is the same question that follows humanity. The god of war was never only a story about fighting. It was a story about learning. Learning that power requires responsibility. Learning that courage requires wisdom. Learning that even the strongest beings must understand themselves. As the final light disappears beyond the mountains, Ares' story begins to settle into memory, not as a tale of endless battles, not as a warning alone, but as the journey of a god who spent eternity searching for his place in the universe, a child who became a warrior who became a symbol that continues reminding humanity of one simple truth. The greatest battles are not always fought with weapons. Some are fought quietly, within the heart. You return to Olympus one final time. The mountain rises quietly beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The winds move gently through the ancient forests. The marble halls that once echoed with the voices of gods now seem almost peaceful. There are no armies gathering, no weapons being lifted, no thunder announcing the beginning of another conflict. Only silence, and within that silence, the story of Ares finally comes to rest. You look back across the long journey of the god who was born beneath the shadow of war. You remember the child who entered Olympus carrying a destiny he did not choose. You remember the young warrior searching for recognition. You remember the god who believed strength alone could define him. You remember the battles, the rivalries, the love, the losses, the moments when pride became a burden, the moments when understanding began to appear. Ares spent eternity surrounded by conflict, yet his greatest discovery came not from battle, it came from reflection. Because the loudest moments of life are not always the most meaningful. Sometimes truth appears after everything becomes quiet. You stand beside an empty battlefield beneath the moonlight. The earth is calm now. The grass moves softly in the breeze. Wildflowers grow between stones that once carried the weight of war. The place remembers, but it no longer suffers. And perhaps this is the final image that remains of Ares. Not a god charging forward with a spear, not a warrior surrounded by flames, but a figure standing in silence, looking upon a world that continues without him. Ancient myths often carried lessons about change and impermanence. Even the gods, who seemed eternal, existed within stories that changed with every generation. Temples disappeared, civilizations transformed, languages evolved. But the questions remained. What is courage? What is power? What is worth defending? What does victory truly mean? Ares never found simple answers. Perhaps no one ever can. Because the human experience itself is filled with contradictions. People desire peace, yet they sometimes create conflict. People fear loss, yet they risk everything for what they love. People seek strength, yet they must also learn compassion. Ares carried all of these struggles, and that is why his story endured. You imagine the final moments of his journey beneath the endless sky. The armor rests beside him. The spear is silent. The battlefield is empty. For the first time. The god of war does not need to prove anything. He does not need to defeat an enemy. He does not need to earn respect. He simply exists, and perhaps this was the peace he searched for all along. Not the peace of a world without struggle, but the peace of finally understanding himself. A mysterious final vision appears. Ares sees Olympus as it was in the beginning. The golden halls, the sacred fires, the gods gathered together. But then the vision changes. The halls become memories. The fires become stars. The voices become whispers carried through time. Everything transforms. Everything passes. Yet something remains. The stories, the lessons, the meaning. The vision offers no clear explanation. Some would say it was a message from destiny. Others would say it was the final understanding of an immortal who had watched countless ages pass. But perhaps the meaning is simpler. Nothing lasts forever, but what we leave behind can continue. Ares is remembered not because he conquered every battlefield. He did not. He is remembered because he represented something that every generation must face. The struggle between power and responsibility, between anger and wisdom, between destruction and creation. The Greeks created many gods, but they also created mirrors. Each god reflected something within humanity. Athena reflected wisdom. Apollo reflected harmony. Aphrodite reflected desire. Poseidon reflected the unpredictable power of nature. And Ares reflected the difficult truth that conflict exists within the human story, not because humans are only violent, but because humans are always choosing. Choosing how to respond, choosing what to protect, choosing what kind of strength they wish to carry. As the night grows deeper, you walk away from the battlefield. The stars shine above you. The wind moves through the trees. The world becomes quieter with every step. The story of Ares is no longer a story about war alone. It is a story about a being who spent eternity discovering that power without understanding is incomplete. A story about a god who wanted to be feared, but became remembered. A story about a warrior who learned that the greatest victory is not defeating another, it is mastering yourself, and perhaps, somewhere beyond the boundaries of human imagination, Ares still watches the world below, not waiting for the next battle, not calling humanity toward conflict, but observing, remembering, understanding. Because even the god of war discovered that every battle eventually ends. Every storm eventually becomes quiet. Every fire eventually becomes ash. And after all the noise disappears, what remains is the memory of what we chose to do with the strength we were given. So tonight, as this ancient story comes to a peaceful close, allow yourself to rest beneath the same stars that watched over Olympus. Remember the child. Remember the warrior. Remember the god. Remember the lesson. Strength is not only found in victory. Courage is not only found in battle. And the greatest battles we face are often the quiet ones within ourselves. If this journey through the life of Ares brought you a moment of calm, consider liking the video and subscribing for more ancient stories told beneath the quiet sky. And share your thoughts in the comments. Which mythological figure would you like to journey with next? Now, let the world grow still. Let the ancient mountains become quiet. Let the waves continue their endless song. And let the story of Ares rest among the stars. Good night.